Daniel Carter never liked surprises, but he made an exception on his 10th wedding anniversary. That night, after work, his wife Marissa handed him a small, velvet box across the dinner table. "You've earned this," she said, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Inside was a vintage Omega wristwatch, gold casing, weathered leather strap, and an engraving on the back. "To more time together." Daniel turned it over in his hands, admiring the craftsmanship, the subtle weight of it. "This is a lot," he said, genuinely surprised. "It reminded me of you," Marissa replied. "Classic, reliable." He laughed, slipping it on. The leather was cold at first, and the metal seemed to pull against his skin like a magnet. Still, he appreciated the thought. Marissa had always preferred gifts with meaning. They shared a toast, and Daniel brushed off the chill that ran up his wrist. He chalked it up to sentimentality, or maybe guilt. Things between them had been off lately. Distant conversations, missed dinners. But tonight, she seemed engaged, affectionate even. As they ate, Marissa asked about his students, cracked a joke about his stubbornness with technology, and leaned her head on his shoulder afterward like she used to. For a moment, it felt like old times. But as the night wore on, Daniel couldn't shake a strange discomfort. Not quite pain, more like static humming just under his skin. He glanced at the watch again. Beautiful, yes, but something about it didn't sit right. Marissa had gone all out for their anniversary dinner. Candlelight, soft jazz, and the scent of garlic and rosemary drifting from the kitchen. She served Daniel his favorite meal, pan-seared steak with mashed potatoes and asparagus, paired with a bottle of red wine they'd been saving since their honeymoon. The table was set perfectly, their wedding photo resting nearby as a centerpiece. As they ate, she asked about his week, laughed at his stories about unruly students, and leaned in to refill his glass with careful attention. Daniel smiled, grateful for the effort, but a flicker of unease lingered beneath the surface. They reminisced about their early days, road trips, shared playlists, late-night talks, and Daniel found himself drawn into the comfort of the memories. Yet despite the warmth of the setting, something about Marissa felt performative. Her laughter was timed too perfectly. Her gaze lingered too long. There was affection, but it felt practiced, like she was following a script. Daniel tried to ignore the feeling. Maybe he was just being paranoid. Maybe after 10 years, a little awkwardness was normal. Still, when she took his hand and squeezed it across the table, the cool leather of the watch brushed his skin, and that strange sensation returned. The next morning, Daniel wore the watch to school. He was never a flashy guy, but something about the gift made him want to honor the gesture. Maybe it would help bridge the growing distance between him and Marissa. By second period, though, something was off. As he lectured on post-war European politics, a faint nausea crept in. He ignored it, chalking it up to the greasy breakfast sandwich he'd grabbed in a rush. But by fourth period, a dull ache had settled behind his eyes, and he found himself gripping the podium to steady a sudden wave of dizziness. His students noticed. "You okay, Mr. Carter?" someone asked. He forced a smile, waved it off, and kept going. But as the day dragged on, his concentration splintered. The words on the whiteboard blurred, and his limbs felt heavier by the hour. During lunch, he loosened his collar and sat in the faculty lounge, trying to breathe deeply, to reorient himself. Then, without much thought, he unbuckled a watch and slipped it into his desk drawer. The change was subtle at first, but within an hour, the pressure behind his eyes eased. By the time the final bell rang, he felt almost normal again. Driving home, Daniel didn't connect the dots. Not yet. He blamed stress, maybe burnout. It was the end of the semester, after all. But the thought scratched at the edge of his mind. That evening, the watch remained in the drawer, and he felt fine. No headache, no nausea. Still, he said nothing to Marissa when she asked how his day went. "Long?" he replied simply. When she asked why he wasn't wearing the watch, he shrugged. Didn't want to scratch it at work. She nodded without pressing. Her indifference bothered him more than he expected. By the third day, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Each morning, Daniel put on the watch, and each day followed the same unsettling routine. Nausea by mid-morning, dizziness after lunch, and a strange pressure in his chest that made him feel caged in his own body. He experimented quietly, wearing it one day, leaving it at home the next. The symptoms only appeared when the watch was on his wrist. It wasn't a coincidence anymore. He even tried wearing it for just an hour before school. Same result. A creeping sense of anxiety settled over him, not just about the physical reaction, but about the source of it. That evening, as Marissa folded laundry in the bedroom, Daniel brought it up. "I think the watch is messing with me," he said lightly, trying not to sound paranoid. "I've felt weird every time I wear it. Nausea, headaches, dizziness, but only when it's on." Marissa looked up, her face unreadable. Then she laughed, short and dismissive. "Maybe you're allergic to old metal or something, or just stressed out. You've been buried in papers all week." Daniel tried to read her tone. Concerned or annoyed? It was hard to tell. "It's not stress," he said more seriously. "It's too specific. The second I take it off, I feel better." Marissa rolled her eyes. "Danny, come on. You're being dramatic. You always do this when you're overwhelmed." The way she brushed it off, so quickly, so cleanly, put Daniel on edge. She'd always been the logical one, the skeptic, but this didn't feel like skepticism. It felt like deflection, and for the first time, he felt a spark of doubt about her. Not just about the watch, but about her intentions. Something wasn't adding up, and the way she smiled and changed the subject only made the unease grow stronger. Over the next week, Daniel's awareness sharpened. He began noticing things he might have brushed off before. Marissa's sudden increase in late-night client work, the way she took calls in the hallway with a door slightly ajar, speaking in hushed tones. When he approached, the conversation always ended quickly. "That was Sophie," she'd say casually. "Deadline drama." Sophie was a name Daniel had heard a few times, one of Marissa's design collaborators, supposedly, but there was something forced in the way she mentioned her, like she was rehearsing it. Her schedule shifted too. She started coming home later, claiming to meet clients in person. Unusual for someone who mostly worked remotely. Daniel asked questions, gently at first, but Marissa grew defensive. "Are you keeping tabs on me now?" she snapped one evening. He backed off, but the damage was done. Her once warm demeanor had cooled, replaced by a stiff politeness that felt foreign. Daniel tried to keep his thoughts grounded. Maybe he was being paranoid. Maybe the stress of teaching, the unexplained illness, the strange behavior. It was all just swirling into something bigger than it really was. But at night, lying awake beside her while she slept peacefully, he couldn't shake the sense that something was watching him from behind her eyes. He began keeping notes, dates, symptoms, interactions, changes in her behavior, not for proof yet, but for clarity, because the more he paid attention, the more he realized how little he truly understood about the person he shared a life with. And in the silence between them, one question echoed louder each day. What if she wasn't trying to fix their marriage at all? What if she was planning his exit from it? By the end of the second week, Daniel knew he couldn't keep second-guessing himself. The physical symptoms weren't going away, and Marissa's behavior only grew stranger. One night, after another tense dinner filled with small talk and long silences, he called Eli Torres, his oldest friend and a seasoned criminal defense attorney. They met at a quiet bar on the edge of town. Neutral ground, dim lighting, no chance of being overheard. Daniel laid it all out. The mysterious illness tied to the watch, Marissa's strange reactions, the guarded phone calls, and the gut-level suspicion he could no longer ignore. Eli listened without interrupting, his expression turning from curiosity to concern. When Daniel mentioned the watch seemed to trigger his symptoms like clockwork, Eli leaned forward. "That's not nothing," he said. "You need to get that thing checked by someone who knows what they're doing." quietly. Daniel nodded. I don't want to go to the police yet, not unless I have something real. Eli agreed, offering to make a few discreet calls. There are people who appraise more than just price tags, he said. You're not crazy, Danny, but if something is going on here, you need to stay smart. Don't confront her. Don't tip her off. For the first time in weeks, Daniel felt something close to relief. Someone believed him. Someone was willing to help. And that gave him just enough resolve to take the next step. 2 days later, Daniel found himself standing in front of a narrow brick storefront on the city's older west side. The faded sign read Green's Timepieces and Appraisals, the kind of place most people walked past without noticing. Eli had vouched for the owner, Walter Green, a retired watchmaker known for his discretion and sharp eye for detail. Inside, the shop smelled faintly of wood polish and old metal. Rows of antique clocks lined the walls, ticking softly in imperfect harmony. Behind the counter stood Walter, a wiry man in his 70s with sharp eyes and steady hands. Daniel explained that the watch had been a gift and that he'd been experiencing odd symptoms when wearing it. He tried to sound casual, like he was just curious, not suspicious of his own wife. Walter nodded slowly, took the Omega from its case, and began examining it under a bright lamp with a jeweler's loupe. For several long minutes he said nothing, just turned the watch over, opened the case back, and peered at its inner workings. Then his expression changed. His brows furrowed, and he glanced up at Daniel with something between confusion and concern. This has been tampered with, he said quietly. See this seam here? That's not factory work. It's been modified, very precisely. He grabbed a small tool and gently pried open a segment near the clasp. Inside was something Daniel never expected. A tiny, nearly invisible glass capillary, tucked neatly inside the metal housing. Walter slid on gloves and carefully extracted it. There's a liquid inside, he said, holding it to the light. Colorless, odorless, not something you'd expect in a watch. Daniel felt his throat go dry. What do you think it is? And say for certain, Walter said, voice low. But I've seen something like this before. It's designed to release minute amounts of a substance over time, absorbed through the skin. Could be nothing, or something very bad. If I had to guess, he looked Daniel in the eyes. This might be a delivery system for a slow-acting poison. Daniel stepped back from the counter, heart pounding. Walter's words hit like a blow to the chest. Poison, in a gift from his wife. The confirmation he never wanted, but now couldn't ignore. Daniel drove home in a haze, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles went white. Walter's words echoed in his head. Slow-acting poison. The idea had been lingering in the shadows of his mind, but hearing it spoken aloud, calmly, clinically, forced it into reality? He didn't want to believe it. Couldn't. Marissa, the woman he'd spent a decade building a life with, wouldn't do something like this, would she? But the evidence was piling up. His symptoms, her evasiveness, the secret calls, the modified watch. It wasn't just paranoia anymore. He sat in his parked car for nearly an hour outside their house, watching the windows glow warmly from within. It looked so normal, like nothing was wrong, but Daniel now saw it all differently. The silence between them, the cold smiles, the gift that made him sick, it was all part of something darker. That night, he didn't sleep. Instead, he stayed in the guest room, pretending to be grading papers. He knew he couldn't confront her yet, not without proof, not without a plan. He had to stay quiet, act normal, and dig deeper, because if Marissa really was trying to kill him, one mistake could be fatal. Daniel waited until Marissa was fast asleep, her breathing slow and even beside him. He slipped out of bed quietly, heart hammering, and padded barefoot to the living room, where her laptop sat charging on the coffee table. She rarely password protected anything. They trusted each other, or at least she thought they did. The screen lit up, and he was in. Most of what he found at first seemed routine: design projects, invoices, client notes. But then he found a hidden folder in the email app labeled Archives. Inside were messages exchanged with someone named Sophie. At first, they read like casual work banter, but further down the thread, the tone shifted. "It's almost over," Marissa had written. "Just a little longer and we'll have everything we need." Sophie's replies were more direct. "Once it's done, you'll be free. We can leave this town behind." The timestamp stretched back months. This wasn't new. Daniel's stomach turned. He searched further and found a digital insurance policy document filed just 3 months earlier, listing him as the insured and Marissa as the sole beneficiary. The payout? $750,000, 0 cents. And buried in an email to an unlisted contact. Discreet delivery system approved. Absorbed through skin. Trace-free. He sat there, stunned, watching years of trust unravel on a screen. This wasn't a marriage. It was a setup. Everything, the romantic dinner, the smile, the watch, had been a mask. Carefully planned. Coldly executed. He copied every file he could onto a flash drive and backed them up to a hidden cloud folder. He closed the laptop, wiped his prints, and went back to bed. As he lay down beside her, he felt something colder than fear settle in his chest. Certainty. She wasn't just lying to him. She wanted him dead. The next morning, Daniel called Eli and told him everything. The emails, the insurance policy, the modified clasp, the name Sophie. Eli listened carefully, then said, "We need to know who built that watch. Someone had to do the modification, and they might know more than they think." Using a contact in private investigations, Eli tracked the serial number on the Omega to a repair workshop outside the city, run until recently by a man named Victor Lemansky, a precision engineer known for custom micro-mechanism work. But Victor had died just a month earlier, officially from heart failure. Daniel and Eli visited Victor's widow Helen, who lived in a modest home surrounded by clocks in various stages of disrepair. When Daniel described the watch, Helen went quiet. Her fingers trembled slightly as she poured tea. "Victor worked on a piece like that," she said. "A man came to him, asked for a custom clasp to be installed. Victor didn't like it, said the design made no sense, too delicate, too specific. He'd taken the job anyway, after pressure and money were applied. He said he felt watched afterward," Helen added softly. "He got paranoid. Then one day he just collapsed." Daniel looked at Eli. Another death. Another warning. The noose was tightening. With the flash drive of evidence in hand, and Helen Lemansky's chilling story fresh in their minds, Daniel and Eli agreed it was time to get the liquid from the watch professionally tested. Eli reached out to a trusted contact, a retired toxicologist named Dr. Lang, who occasionally consulted on criminal cases. They met in the back room of Lang's modest home lab, away from prying eyes and official channels. The man took one look at the capillary tube and raised an eyebrow. "This isn't something you find in a timepiece," he muttered. 2 tense days later, Dr. Lang called with the results. "It's thallium," he said flatly. "A heavy metal, tasteless, odorless, extremely toxic in even small doses, absorbs through the skin, causes progressive neurological damage, nausea, tremors, mental fog. Long-term exposure can be fatal, and it's often mistaken for natural causes." Daniel's chest tightened. The symptoms matched his exactly. What had started as suspicion was now confirmed. The watch wasn't just dangerous. It was a murder weapon. Combined with the insurance policy, the secret messages, and the widow's testimony, it was enough to move forward. Eli was grim but resolute. "This is attempted murder, Daniel. She planned everything. We take this to the police. Now." Daniel nodded, the weight of the truth finally settling into clarity. There was no more room for doubt. Marissa hadn't just given him a gift. She'd handed him a countdown to his own death. That afternoon, Daniel and Eli walked into the precinct with a folder full of evidence and a flash drive in hand. They requested a meeting with a detective and were introduced to Detective Karen Mills, a calm, sharp-eyed investigator with over 2 decades on the force. In a private interview room, Daniel laid out everything: the symptoms tied to the watch, the toxicology report confirming thallium, the modified clasp, the insurance policy, and the digital messages between Marissa and Sophie. He spoke with quiet resolve, each word landing heavier than the last. Detective Mills listened intently, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she exhaled slowly and said, "You've done half my job already." She asked a few clarifying questions, mostly focused on timeline and access. Then she looked Daniel in the eye. "You're in danger. We'll act on this, but until we move, you need to behave exactly as you have. No confrontations, no changes. Understood?" Daniel nodded. "Understood. We'll need to verify everything, but if this holds, we're looking at an attempted homicide case, and from what I'm seeing so far, it holds." As they left the station, Daniel felt a strange mix of fear and relief. The machine was in motion now, and if the police acted quickly, he might just live to see it through. The arrest came quietly, just 3 days later. Daniel was sitting in the living room pretending to grade papers when 2 unmarked cars pulled up outside. Through the window, he saw Marissa in the kitchen scrolling through her phone, completely unaware. When the knock came, she answered it with her usual calm, only to find 2 officers and Detective Mills standing on the porch. "Marissa Carter?" Mills asked. "You're under arrest for attempted murder." Marissa froze, confusion flashing across her face before shifting to controlled disbelief. "This is a mistake," she said calmly, her voice tight. "I don't know what this is about." But as they cuffed her and read her rights, Daniel saw something flicker in her expression. Not shock, but calculation. She didn't fight, didn't cry, just looked at him once over her shoulder, eyes blank. A station. She denied everything, claimed the emails were taken out of context, said Daniel was unstable, that he was fabricating evidence due to marital tension. But the paper trail was airtight. The toxicology confirmed poisoning, and the watchmaker's widow corroborated the modified clasp. It wasn't a theory anymore. It was a case. For Daniel, watching her being led away wasn't vindication. It was heartbreak. But it was also the first moment he truly felt safe. The months that followed felt surreal. Marissa was denied bail and held in custody as the investigation expanded. The police uncovered not only her affair with Sophie, but a tangled web of financial desperation. Maxed out credit cards, hidden loans, and the recent insurance policy that named Daniel as the only casualty required for a full payout. The prosecution built a solid case, supported by digital records, toxicology results, and the testimony from Walter Green and Helen Lemansky. When the trial began, it drew local media attention. A clean-cut school teacher nearly murdered by his wife in a slow, calculated plot. Daniel chose not to attend most of the proceedings. He didn't need to hear the defense twist his marriage into fiction or listen to Marissa's voice trying to paint him as paranoid. He'd already lived through the worst of it. In the end, the jury deliberated for just under 2 hours. Marissa was found guilty on all charges: attempted murder, insurance fraud, and conspiracy. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison without parole. Daniel watched the verdict on the news, alone in his new apartment. There were no cheers, no relief, just silence. Justice had been served, but the scars ran deep. He wasn't celebrating, he was surviving. A year after the trial, Daniel had left nearly everything behind. The house, the school, the routines that once defined his life. He relocated to a smaller town upstate, took a part-time teaching job at a community college, and started therapy to untangle the trauma that had quietly rewired him. Trust didn't come easily anymore, and he was okay with that. Healing wasn't quick or clean. It came in pieces. Some found in quiet walks through unfamiliar streets. Others in long, honest conversations with Eli, who remained his one unwavering constant. One crisp spring morning, Daniel stepped into a small watch boutique on a whim. He wasn't looking for anything extravagant, just something simple, modern, and reliable. After browsing for a while, he chose a stainless steel field watch. No hidden compartments, no engraved messages, just clean lines and a clear face. As he strapped it onto his wrist, he felt a quiet shift inside him. This time, the watch wasn't a symbol of someone else's intention, it was his. Back home, he set it down beside a notebook titled Day One. It wasn't about starting over, not exactly. It was about starting on his own terms. He didn't know what came next, and for the first time in a long while, that felt like freedom. He wasn't waiting to be saved or sabotaged. He'd survived the plan set against him, and now, finally, the time was his. The story of Daniel Carter is a chilling reminder that danger doesn't always come crashing through the door. It can come gift-wrapped, disguised as love, and delivered by the person you trust most. The lesson here isn't just about betrayal. It's about listening to your instincts, paying attention to patterns, and valuing your own perception even when others dismiss it. Daniel's survival didn't come from brute strength. It came from quiet persistence, observation, and the courage to act when everything inside him screamed that something was wrong. If this story moved you, made you think twice about the things we take for granted in our closest relationships, or reminded you of the power of trusting your gut, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video if you believe in stories that blend suspense with emotional truth. Subscribe to the channel for more original thrillers, mysteries, and stories that explore the dark corners of human relationships. And most importantly, share this with someone who needs a reminder. Your intuition is not paranoia, it's survival instinct. Trust it. Thanks for watching. Stay sharp, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something just isn't right.